It had been 7 years. 7 years of being engaged to Chloe. I stood there, drenched in a sudden downpour, watching as she clung to him. Their kiss was desperate, almost frantic, illuminated by the flashing streetlights. "Leo," she had promised him, her voice carrying over the sound of the rain. "I swear I'll be yours forever." As for me, I was just a spectator in the deluge. The cold rain blurred the world around me, but it also seemed to wash away the years of fog that had clouded my judgment. Without a second thought, I turned on my heel and began to walk away. I didn't hesitate, not for a moment. For the first time in a very long time, I was choosing to see the reality that was right in front of me. I was finished with being blind. I carefully placed the worn, slightly faded engagement documents on the coffee table. Next to them, I set down the jade pendant that had been a symbol of our commitment. Chloe was standing by the window, her back to me, meticulously adjusting the cuffs of her crisp pilot's uniform. When I finally spoke, my voice was quieter than I expected, but it cut through the silence in the room. "Chloe, let's call it off." Her hands, slender and pale, froze in their task. She stood still for a long moment before slowly straightening her collar and turning to face me. Her eyes, the same ones I had gotten lost in for a decade, sized me up with a cool detachment. "Ethan, are you certain about this?" I gave a small, firm nod, my voice holding steady. "I'm certain." To ensure there was no room for misunderstanding, to make her feel the finality of my decision, I added, "I have given this a great deal of thought." Chloe turned her head slightly, her gaze drifting to the gloomy sky outside. The heavy, overcast weather perfectly matched the mood that had settled in our apartment. Finally, she nodded and rose to her feet, a hint of nonchalance in her voice that she couldn't quite conceal. "Fine. Whatever you want." She gestured vaguely towards the other side of the room. "The other copy of the papers and your jade bangle are in the safe in the study. You can retrieve them yourself. I have to get to work." She picked up her roller bag and cap, her expression a complete blank. I murmured a quiet, "Okay," and walked past her into the house. I opened the safe with a familiar sequence of turns, a motion I had performed 1,000 times before, my jade pendant for her jade bangle, her engagement papers for mine. I clutched the cool stone of the bangle in my hand, my fingertips brushing against the yellowed edges of the paper as I slowly stood up. Over the past 7 years, I had rehearsed this moment in my mind more times than I could count. But each time I had faltered at the end, filled with a familiar cocktail of regret and a stubborn unwillingness to let go. This time, however, my resolve was solid. There would be no looking back. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my courage and walked out of the study. From this point forward, nothing would remain between Chloe and me. I expected to find the apartment empty, but she was still there, standing by the front door, seemingly waiting for me. My pace slowed. My first instinct was to pretend I hadn't noticed her and simply walk out. But she suddenly stepped forward, her hand closing around mine. Her brow was furrowed with a look of concern that felt entirely out of place. "Ethan, what happened yesterday was just a misunderstanding." I looked down at her delicate hands clasped around my own, a tempest of emotions churning within me, but I refused to meet her eyes. A misunderstanding? Yesterday, in the pouring rain, in front of anyone who cared to look, she had promised Leo she would be with him for the rest of her life. How many times had she defended him, stood up for him? She had even taken a drink meant for him at a party, boldly declaring that Leo was her person. Could she really dismiss all of that as a simple misunderstanding? I gently extracted my hand from her grasp. Without saying a word, I calmly opened the door. It didn't matter anymore. After all, between Chloe and me there was nothing left. On my way back to my office at the university, I ran into Leo in the hallway. He was laughing animatedly with a colleague, a wide, triumphant smile plastered on his face. When he saw me approaching, his expression shifted. A provocative smirk formed on his lips as he suddenly stuck his leg out, a clumsy attempt to trip me. In the past, to keep the peace and make Chloe happy, I probably would have stepped aside, mumbled an apology, or even taken a different route to avoid a confrontation. But today was different. I didn't hesitate. I shoved him hard, sending him stumbling sideways. His arm slammed against the wall with a dull thud. Leo clearly hadn't expected that. He pushed back, his face contorted with rage as he shouted, "Ethan, are you insane? Do you have any idea who you just pushed?" I stood my ground, my expression calm, as I answered him in a flat, even tone. "I know. I pushed Chloe's savior." 3 years ago, Chloe's grandmother, Mrs. Gable, had collapsed on the street after suffering a sudden heart attack. It was Leo, a passerby, who performed CPR and called for an ambulance, ultimately saving her life. Her grandmother was Chloe's entire world, and so she felt an eternal, unpayable debt to Leo. That profound gratitude had slowly, insidiously, morphed into a kind of unconditional support and protection. In Chloe's world, whatever Leo needed, whatever he wanted, always came first. The first time Chloe abandoned me for him was on our 4th anniversary. Her friends had secretly informed me that she was planning to propose that day, a revelation that left me both thrilled and incredibly nervous. Chloe had never been one for grand romantic gestures. I didn't want the moment to be anything less than perfect, so I spent an entire month's salary to reserve the most coveted table at top of the tower, a restaurant with panoramic city views, wanting the most beautiful backdrop possible for the start of the next chapter of our lives together. That night, I sat in the dream-like restaurant, surrounded by fresh flowers and the quiet applause of other diners celebrating their own milestones. I gently cut into an exquisite little cake with a silver knife. Just then, I saw it. A man's ring, glittering under the warm, ambient lights. My heart swelled with an indescribable mix of excitement and joy. But the perfect moment was fleeting. Chloe's phone rang. It was Leo. Without a second of hesitation, she stood up to leave, leaving me utterly stunned. My smile froze on my face. The words, "Don't go," were on the tip of my tongue, but I swallowed them down, managing only to ask, "Can't you leave a little later?" She just frowned, her gaze sweeping over the cake on the table, as if she had only just remembered what day it was. In the end, her voice was cold when she spoke. "Ethan, don't be so dramatic. Leo sprained his ankle and can't get around. I have to take him to the hospital." Sometimes a man's intuition is painfully accurate. That night, as I watched Chloe's retreating back, a single, clear thought surfaced in my mind. She isn't mine. Even with that powerful premonition, I could never quite resist the magnetic pull of my feelings for her. I fell for it, time and time again, willingly giving every part of myself for love. How many times had Chloe left me for Leo? So many that even I had started to lose count. "You knew, and you still pushed me?" Leo's sharp, incredulous voice echoed through the hallway, snapping me back to the present. I looked at him calmly. "You're Chloe's savior. What does that have to do with me?" In the past, Chloe not only shielded Leo from any consequences, but also demanded that I tolerate his every whim and transgression. My unconditional retreat had only made Leo bolder. He didn't just steal my promotion opportunities. He tried to take my students, my research grants, and eventually my fiancée. But as I stood there, I realized I no longer cared about any of those past arguments and losses. "Chloe and I broke off the engagement," I told him, the words dropping like a stone into a still lake, sending ripples outward. Leo was clearly stunned. His expression shifted from surprise to outright disbelief. It made sense, I suppose. Chloe came from a prominent family, was undeniably beautiful, and held the distinction of being the youngest female captain at her airline, with a future that seemed limitless. With a resume like that, men were practically lining up for a chance with her. But in my eyes, a woman who didn't love me, no matter how outstanding she was, had lost all her value. Seeing how casual I was, a slow smile bloomed on Leo's face. He asked, his voice filled with excitement, "Is that true? You two really called it off?" His joyous expression didn't sting me in the slightest. I just looked at him and said again, in that same calm voice, "Yes, Chloe and I are done. Now you two can be together without hiding it." Before I had even finished speaking, Leo dashed into his office, grabbed his bag, and hurried away. I knew he couldn't wait to find Chloe and share the good news. Just then, a colleague approached me, their face etched with concern. "Professor, are you okay?" they asked quietly. I took a deep breath, forced a smile I didn't feel, and said softly, "I'm fine." After an hour-long lecture, my stomach was growling. I walked back to my office, a hand pressed against the empty space. As I walked in, a kind colleague handed me a sandwich. I quickly took it, thanking her profusely. She was scrolling through her phone and mumbled, almost to herself, "Looks like Professor Leo is in a relationship. He just made it official on his social feed." My heart skipped a beat. I quickly pulled out my phone and navigated to Leo's profile. The post was time-stamped 12/12, Chloe's birthday. He had posted a photo of himself with Chloe, a backdrop of blue sky and white clouds behind them, and another artistic shot of their hands clasped together. He was holding a cute little ice cream cone. The caption was nauseatingly sweet. "The ice cream is mine, you're mine, and I'm yours." Seeing it, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The sandwich in my hand suddenly felt like cardboard. I looked up, and my eyes landed on the framed photo of Chloe in her pilot's uniform, poised and elegant, still sitting on my desk. It felt like a personal jab. Without a second thought, I picked up the frame, dismantled it, and walked over to the office shredder. I fed the photograph into the machine, piece by piece. With the low whir of the motor, the image of her was slowly pulverized, disappearing until it was gone without a trace. I returned to my desk and started devouring the sandwich, as if I could swallow all of my emotions along with it. At 7:30 that evening, I dragged my exhausted body home. My phone rang. It was my mom. I hesitated for a moment before finally answering. "Hi, Mom." My voice carried a hint of sadness and hurt that I couldn't quite hide. "Chloe and I called off the engagement," I said quietly. My mom's voice was immediately filled with worry and confusion. "Why would you be so impulsive? You're 30 years old, Ethan. What are you going to do now? Where are you going to find another girl as good as Chloe, with all her qualities? Besides, this engagement was arranged by your grandfather and her grandmother. Even though your grandpa's gone now and hers is in the hospital, we can't just break our promise like this. You need to go talk to Chloe's grandmother. If she agrees, then I won't say anything more." I hung up the phone and sat alone on the spacious balcony, looking out at the sprawling city. It was a sea of brilliant, twinkling lights, but I felt as if I had been forgotten in a dark corner, as if none of those lights belonged to me. I couldn't help but wonder if I was destined to just keep walking this lonely road. Just then, my phone buzzed, breaking my train of thought. I glanced at the screen. It was my old mentor from college. I swiped to answer. "Hey, Professor." His voice came through, sounding a bit urgent. "That fellowship in France, what have you decided? If you don't make up your mind soon, Leo is going to snatch it up." I answered without a moment's hesitation. I'll go." Then, I added with a newfound seriousness, "From now on, any opportunity the department offers me, I'm not giving it up for Leo. Not ever again." My mentor started rambling on the other end, expressing his relief that I had finally seen the light. I managed a bitter smile. The truth was, it wasn't that I'd suddenly seen the light. I was just beginning to understand that you have to fight for what is rightfully yours, and not give it up so easily. And as for what was never mine to begin with, there was simply no point in trying to force it. The next day was Saturday. I had planned to sleep in, but the shrill ring of my phone shattered my morning peace. Chloe's voice came through the receiver, cold and accusatory. "Ethan, have you lost your mind? You actually told your family we broke up? You're 30 years old. Can't you act like a grown-up instead of being impulsive like some 23-year-old kid?" Her words snapped me out of my groggy state. "Chloe," I said, taking a deep breath to keep my voice steady. "You're in love with Leo, aren't you?" There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line, so thick it felt like the air had solidified between us. Finally, she spoke, her voice laced with a subtle struggle. "Ethan, not all love is a reason to be together. My relationship with Leo isn't what you think." She added, as if it settled everything, "But you and I are the ones who are supposed to get married." I lay in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling, a whirlwind of emotions churning inside me. This woman, whom I had loved for nearly a decade, now felt like a complete and utter stranger, a profound disappointment. "Chloe, do you remember? The first time you publicly ditched me for Leo was on our 4th anniversary. You were supposed to be with me that day, but you chose him. And that time at the bar. You took a drink for him, and when you played truth or dare, you kissed him without a moment's hesitation. Chloe, I was sitting right next to you. Did it ever cross your mind, even for a second, that I was your fiancé?" I paused, the memories twisting like a knife. "But the thing that hurt the most was when you sabotaged me. You knew how much I wanted to become an associate professor, and you knew that if I completed my research paper, I would get the promotion. But you used your parents' influence to have me removed from the project and replaced with Leo. You knew perfectly well that Leo wasn't qualified for that project, but you chose him anyway." With every incident I recounted, my eyes grew wetter, and the overwhelming sense of betrayal and disappointment washed over me like a tidal wave. "Chloe, you're in love with him. And at the same time, you've stomped on my dignity again and again. What else is there to say?" As soon as I finished, I heard the dial tone. Chloe had hung up without so much as an apology. She really was a coward. Chloe flew again, this time to Miami. Conveniently, Leo volunteered for a business trip to Miami as well. Due to severe weather, Chloe's layover in Miami was extended by 2 days, so naturally, Leo stayed for 2 extra days too. I tried not to be bothered by news of them, but Leo was constantly posting updates about their dates on his social media feed, so I finally just blocked him. My life slowly returned to a normal rhythm. The university, my apartment, and the gym became my daily routine. I thought back to how I used to carve out time from my impossibly busy schedule to make soup for Chloe and her colleagues, driving it all the way to her just to receive a few simple words of thanks. Now, I used that time to rest. I no longer had to worry about dozing off during lectures or relying on bitter coffee to keep myself going. A few days later, Chloe was back. She was wearing a black wool coat, looking as poised and impeccable as ever, and she stopped me at the university gate, asking if we could talk. She took me to the same restaurant we'd gone to on our 4th anniversary, top of the tower. We sat at the same central table, surrounded by flowers, applause, and the elegant melody of a cello. She carefully cut my steak for me and said in a slightly hoarse voice, "I've been thinking seriously about what you said the other day. I know I haven't been good enough. From now on, I'll change. I'll stand by your side no matter what." I didn't touch the steak. I just picked up my glass of red wine. I admit, Leo and I crossed a line in the past. It was my fault for not distinguishing between a friend and a fiancé. "Ethan, can you give me one more chance? I promise I'll change." She looked at me earnestly, holding out a box with an expensive-looking watch inside. I looked at her, then at the exquisite watch, and finally gave a slow nod. "Okay." The tension in Chloe's face instantly melted away, but just at that moment her phone, sitting on the table, began to ring. The caller ID read, "Leo." Chloe shot me an apologetic look. I deliberately looked down, pretending to be intensely focused on the steak in front of me, avoiding her gaze. I remembered how every time she took a call from Leo in front of me, she could never quite hide the flicker of guilt in her eyes. And I, in turn, would always pretend to be magnanimous and understanding, allowing her to walk the fine line of my tolerance. This time was no different. She offered a quick explanation. "I have to take this. Leo knows I'm here with you today. He wouldn't call unless it was an emergency." With that, she answered the phone. On the other end, Leo's voice was choked with tears. "Chloe, I'm in trouble. I hit someone with my car, and they're demanding $20,000 to let me go, but I don't have that kind of money." Chloe's expression immediately turned anxious. As expected, she replied instantly, "Send me your location. I'm on my way." After hanging up, she tried to assure me that this was absolutely the last time she would help Leo, promising that from now on, she'd tell him to call the police instead of relying on her. I didn't look up at her. I just silently finished the last piece of steak on my plate and swallowed the last sip of wine. In the grand hall, a violinist was playing "The Next Second," the melody soaring and romantic. Suddenly, brilliant fireworks exploded in the sky outside the panoramic window, adding a dreamlike quality to the scene. Inside the restaurant, the smiles on every couple's face grew sweeter, except for mine. I was sitting there all alone. 3 years ago, and now 3 years later, it seemed I was always the one left behind in this corner, facing everything by myself. I made a silent promise to myself that I would probably never set foot in this restaurant again for the rest of my life. Just then, my phone vibrated. A text message broke the silence. I opened it. The words dripped with Leo's smugness and provocation, as if he'd already won. "Ethan, a woman like Chloe was born to be with me." The attached video showed Chloe standing protectively in front of Leo, shielding him from a group of angry bystanders. I remembered what Leo had said so confidently that afternoon as I was leaving my office. "Chloe's going to apologize to you tonight, but her heart will always be with me." I admit, for a fleeting moment when I saw the watch, I had wavered. I had fantasized that if Chloe could just spend the whole evening with me, maybe, just maybe, I would give her one last chance. But reality was always so painfully ironic. Maybe even fate was taking pity on me, using a burst of celebratory fireworks to declare the definitive, spectacular end of my 10-year relationship with Chloe. In that moment, I knew with absolute, chilling clarity that she was completely, utterly dead to me. The next morning, I flew to Chicago to handle my visa for France. After finishing the paperwork, I took the engagement papers and the jade bangle and went to the nursing home to visit Chloe's grandmother. I had been there several times before. On my previous visits, Mrs. Gable's health was poor, and her mind was often foggy. She rarely recognized me, but luckily, this time she was much more lucid. The moment she saw me, she called out, warmly, "Ethan." I took the opportunity to explain why I was there and handed her the engagement papers. She took the jade bangle, rubbing it gently in her hands, and was silent for a long time. Her gaze seemed to look right through me, into the distant past. "Ethan, 20 years ago, before your grandfather passed away, He entrusted you to me. And I, in turn, entrusted you to my granddaughter, Chloe. Back then, we all hoped that the love our families wished for would blossom between you two. I never imagined it would end up with you waiting all these years. Our Chloe has wronged you." Mrs. Gable's voice was filled with a deep, sincere apology. My eyes welled up with tears, but I shook my head, trying to compose myself. "Grandma, Chloe taught me what it feels like to love someone, and I'm grateful to her for that. Even though things didn't turn out the way I wanted, I've learned that you can't force love. I'm choosing to let go now, and I don't regret it. Grandma, this is my decision," I said firmly. Mrs. Gable sighed softly, then tore the yellowed engagement papers into pieces and handed the jade bangle back to me. "My dear boy, I support you. Whatever you decide, I will always be on your side." A month later, my visa was approved, and I boarded a flight to France. I had carefully packed the jade bangle in my suitcase, as if sealing away a piece of my past. As the cabin door slowly closed, I instinctively raised my phone, wanting to capture the brilliant sunset outside my window as a final memento. But just as I was about to press the shutter, an unexpected figure burst into my line of sight. It was Chloe, looking completely frantic. As I stared in shock, a flight attendant suddenly announced that due to an issue on the tarmac, we would have to return to the terminal and wait. A wave of questions and complaints immediately rippled through the cabin. Following the flight attendant's instructions, I grabbed my bag and walked toward the front of the plane, toward Chloe. A rare look of pure panic was on her face. She opened her arms without hesitation and pulled me into a tight hug, whispering, "Why didn't you tell me you were going to France for a fellowship?" I gently pushed her away, my eyes scanning the bewildered passengers around us. I tried to stay calm as I said, "You shouldn't be here." Chloe didn't seem ready to give up. She gripped my hand tightly and pressed the jade pendant into my palm. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. Forgive me. Let's start over, okay? We can go get married right now." I looked down at the pendant in my hand and then up at Chloe, her face a mask of apology. But my heart was strangely calm, without a single ripple of the old feelings. I began to speak slowly and clearly. "Chloe, back at the restaurant that day, it's not that I didn't think about giving you a chance, but that day, 1 second you were apologizing to me, promising you would always be on my side. And the next, you left me there for Leo again. You can't even keep a promise you just made. I don't want to give you any more chances." I took a breath. "Chloe, I was with you for 10 years, from 20 to 30. I spent almost all of my brightest, most passionate years on you. To be honest, I have wondered if I have another 10 years to waste on someone else. But when the thought of just settling for a life with you started to fill me with a sense of dread, that's when I knew. I'm really, truly over you." After I finished, I pushed the pendant back into her hand and turned to leave. For years, I was always the one left waiting for her. This time, I was leaving on my own terms. An hour later, I was back in my seat on the plane. Looking out the window, the tarmac was quiet. There was not a single person in sight. The dazzling star of my youthful story had finally, silently, faded into the crowd, lost to me forever. As I walked into the first-class cabin, other passengers shot me curious, complicated glances, then went back to whispering among themselves. I could faintly hear their speculation. So it was some big-shot CEO chasing down her man, and we were just the extras. I gently closed my eyes, choosing to ignore the chatter. 12 hours later, I stepped onto Parisian soil. The first breath of air was fresh, clean, and invigorating. On the street, a moment of carelessness led to my suitcase colliding with a woman's, sending the contents of her bag scattering everywhere. I apologized profusely and, as a further apology, offered to buy her dinner. At dinner, She wore an elegant black silk blouse, her every move exuding a refined air. As we parted ways, she handed me a business card. It read, Sophie Lynn, Professor of Literature, Arts, and Cinema, University of Paris-Cité. My academic life in France was intense and fulfilling. I had to conquer the mountain that was the French language while simultaneously keeping up with my studies. In the midst of all the busyness, I was surprised to find that I hadn't once thought of Chloe. It wasn't until the Lunar New Year that she came to mind. I had chosen to stay in Paris for the holidays due to travel restrictions back home. During a video call with my mom, Chloe unexpectedly appeared on the screen. My mom smiled and told me, Chloe said she was stopping by to see us on your behalf. Through the screen, I nodded at her in greeting, but was at a complete loss for words. Chloe's gaze was fixed on me. After a moment, she asked softly, Have you been well this past year? I was quiet for a moment, reflecting on the year's ups and downs, and finally answered with a genuine smile, Very well. After hanging up, I was putting away the groceries I'd just bought when there was a knock at the door. Sophie stood there, holding heavy bags with a few melting snowflakes dusting her shoulders. As she came in, a puff of white air escaped her lips. Her smile was warm and a little mischievous. I knew you weren't going home this year, so I came to spend the holiday with you. Hope that's not too forward. I moved aside to let her in. She went straight to the kitchen as if she owned the place, put down the things she'd brought, and poured herself a glass of water. Looking back, Sophie's appearance in my life in France was a small, wonderful surprise. From our hasty parting at the airport to our unexpected reunion at the university, and then discovering she lived just a street away, our paths began to cross with a natural, easy frequency. We often ate together and walked home from school together. She taught me French, and I cooked her Chinese food. Gradually, we became good friends, but I knew what Sophie was really thinking. One day, at a cozy little restaurant, she gave me a huge surprise. The restaurant was playing soft love songs when a waiter suddenly appeared with a cake and balloons. Sophie got down on one knee, holding an exquisite watch, while our friends who were in on it cheered us on. Her love was direct and passionate. Her question, "Will you be my partner in the future?" moved me so much I could barely speak. However, while I accepted the balloons and shared the cake, I didn't accept the watch. Sophie was confused and asked me about it for over a month. Finally, I calmly told her the story of my 10-year relationship with Chloe. I told her, "You have a stable job and life here in Paris, and I'm going back home next year. Neither of us would give up our lives for the other. A relationship like that is probably better off as a friendship." After hearing that, Sophie seemed to understand and didn't press the issue anymore. But she still acted like a friend who would occasionally say she was lonely, eating by herself, and come over to my place for a home-cooked meal. The day I flew back home, I was surprised to run into Sophie in the cabin. She elegantly raised her exquisitely shaped hands and smiled. "A change of scenery might bring some new surprises, don't you think?" My heart fluttered, sending ripples through me. What happened next was even more unexpected. When we landed, I saw Chloe on the tarmac, waiting to pick me up. She walked toward me as if nothing had changed between us, reaching out to fix my hair just like she used to. But this time, another hand intercepted hers. Sophie, tall and poised, stood in front of me, a challenging smile on her face. "Wow, you've got some nerve coming all the way out to the tarmac to pick up my boyfriend." Chloe's face instantly darkened. She looked at me in disbelief and asked in a low voice, "Ethan, is what she's saying true?" She clenched her fists, seemingly trying to restrain a wave of emotion. I moved to stand firmly by Sophie's side and gave a slight nod. "Yes, let me introduce you. This is my girlfriend, Sophie." A flash of raw pain crossed Chloe's eyes. In the end, she said nothing and turned to walk away. Watching her retreating back, I couldn't help but marvel at how time could change everything so completely. Just then, I felt Sophie's breath on my neck. Her soft, slightly teasing voice whispered in my ear. "The first time I get to make it official, and I have your ex-girlfriend to thank for the assist. Is she really so captivating that you can't even tear your eyes away?" I laughed and gave her a gentle push. "I was just reflecting, that's all." The next day I stood at the university entrance under a brilliant, sun-drenched sky. The department head and my colleagues were already there, waiting to give me a warm welcome back. After some friendly catching up, I returned to my familiar office. My gaze drifted to my desk. Where the frame with Chloe's picture used to be, there was now a bouquet of vibrant champagne roses. Next to it was a card with Sophie's neat, strong handwriting. "Congratulations on the promotion. Dinner tonight to celebrate." My office neighbor saw it and immediately gave me a curious, gossipy look. Well, you just got back and there's already something new going on?" I smiled and shook my head, slipping the card into a drawer. "Just a friend I met abroad," I said lightly. My colleague got even more excited and was about to press for more details when another colleague walked in, holding a bouquet of pink roses. "Ethan, these are from Captain Gable." My brow furrowed. I was about to refuse them when the first colleague pulled me aside mysteriously and whispered, "Did you hear? Leo was exposed for plagiarizing his thesis and got expelled. Captain Gable didn't pull any strings for him this time." I gently pulled my hand away, glanced at the pink roses, and decided not to accept them. "Throw them out. I'm not a fan of pink roses." After my colleague left, the light, gossipy atmosphere instantly vanished. I sat down, opened my laptop, and threw myself into my work. When it was time to leave, I grabbed my bag and was heading out when I ran into Chloe in the hallway. She was staring at the bouquet of pink roses in the large trash can at the end of the hall, seemingly lost in thought. As I passed, she called out to me softly, her voice gentle and cautious. "Ethan, to celebrate your promotion, could we go out for dinner?" I shook my head gently, declining her offer. "No thanks. My girlfriend is taking me out." Chloe seemed taken aback by my answer. She hesitated for a second, then grabbed my hand, her tone pleading. "Ethan, the thing with Leo is over. I've been reflecting on my mistakes. Can't you just give me a chance to start over?" I pulled my hand away, a hint of impatience in my voice. "Chloe, I don't love you anymore. Please stop pestering me." The word pestering seemed to sting her. She looked at me in disbelief and demanded, "Ethan, are you saying I'm pestering you?" I looked her straight in the eye, my voice firm. "Yes, you are." Sometimes I ask myself how I managed to stick it out in such a twisted relationship, with Leo standing between us for the last 3 years of our decade together. Then, I finally figured it out. I paused before continuing. "A person like you, from a prominent family, beautiful, dazzling, and proud, was willing to humble yourself and apologize only to me. I admit, that sense of favoritism you gave me made me feel secure. But then I realized that all this so-called special treatment was really just for Leo's sake." At this, Chloe's eyes filled with unease. I ruthlessly exposed her true feelings and the lies she'd been hiding behind. "The one you truly favored wasn't me. It was Leo. You couldn't face the fact that you'd fallen for a man who, while handsome, lacked a prestigious degree, ambition, and a good family background. You were afraid of being judged by others for being heartless, and you couldn't admit your own emotional infidelity. Chloe, you only ever thought about your own feelings. You let two men waste their youth and energy because of your indecisiveness and selfishness. You are selfish to the core. My guess is the reason you didn't step in for Leo this time is because you were worried that, after my promotion, I would make things difficult for him, right? The color drained from Chloe's face. Finally, I left her with one last, cold remark. The person who likes pink roses isn't me. It's Leo. With that, I turned and walked away without looking back. At the university gate, Sophie was standing by a lamppost in a striking camel-colored wool coat. Impossible to miss. I walked over, naturally linking my arm with hers, and pushed all my earlier frustrations out of my mind. "Let's go," I said with a smile. After we got in the car, she carefully fastened my seatbelt, handed me her phone, and then got back into the driver's seat. I'm not too familiar with the restaurants here, but I did some research and picked out a few. See which one you like. Sophie and I have very similar tastes. The restaurants she took me to abroad were always fantastic. She had a few options on her phone screen. I barely hesitated, pointing directly at the top-ranked top of the tower. "Let's go here. I used to go a lot. The food is great." At the restaurant, I expertly ordered a few dishes I remembered fondly. "These are all delicious," I said to Sophie with a smile. "Consider this your first official meal back home. Here's to a smooth job search." The ambiance was still as luxurious and elegant as ever, the familiar atmosphere and melodious violin music intoxicating. But unlike 3 years ago, when I thought I'd never set foot in here again, my mood was completely different this time. This time, I didn't feel so alone. Sophie raised her wine glass to gently clink with mine. Under the soft lighting, her beautiful face was even more captivating. "Today was supposed to be a celebration for you, but it's my celebratory meal," she said, her tone shifting slightly. "Ethan, my parents are coming to St. Louis next week. Would you be willing to meet them with me?" she asked earnestly. I smiled and nodded. Of course. After that talk with Chloe, I blocked her on everything, but over the weekend she called me from an unknown number. "Grandma's sick," she said. "She keeps asking for you. She hopes you can come see her." I felt a pang of unease, but didn't agree immediately, just gave a vague response. After hanging up, I couldn't stop worrying. I immediately called a taxi to the nursing home. When I got there, I saw that Mrs. Gable was indeed very ill. Perhaps because of her age, she didn't remember me at all. I took the jade bangle from my pocket and gently placed it in her hand. "Grandma, it's Ethan. I came to see you," I said softly. Although her mind was foggy, Mrs. Gable recognized the jade bangle. She mistook me for her old friend, my grandfather, and started chatting away. Just then, Chloe came in. The joy in her eyes when she saw me was obvious. I stayed with Mrs. Gable until evening, finally managing to get her to sleep. As I was about to leave, Sophie sent me a message saying she was coming to pick me up. I stood up, ignored Chloe, and walked straight to the door. But she blocked my path, holding out the jade bangle I had left behind. That's when I remembered I'd given it to her grandmother to calm her down. I took the bangle and said a simple, "Thanks." Chloe took a step forward, closing the distance between us, a flicker of pain in her eyes. "You still have the jade bangle from our engagement. Why won't you forgive me?" she asked. Just then, a message popped up on my phone screen. Sophie was here. Chloe's persistence was starting to get on my nerves. "Chloe, there's no point in dragging this out," I said directly, hoping she would finally give up, but instead of backing down, she pressed closer, her eyes frighteningly red as she stared at me. "I don't believe you. If you were really over me, you wouldn't have kept the bangle. You're just angry with me, right?" I couldn't take it anymore. I forcefully shook her hand off and pushed her away. A storm of emotions crossed Chloe's face. Hurt, confusion, anxiety, and regret all mixed together. I looked at her calmly and said one word at a time. I kept this bangle because of your grandmother. It has nothing to do with you. Let me repeat myself, Chloe. We are over. It ended 2 years ago. Do you understand? I emphasized. Chloe's gaze suddenly went vacant, as if she wasn't seeing me. Suddenly, she lunged at me, shouting, "Look out!" I instinctively turned my head just as an old man rushed out of a nearby room, brandishing a pair of scissors and charging straight at me. I had no time to react. All I could do was shut my eyes. But a moment later, I felt a force pull me into a tight embrace. My body spun around, and a familiar, sweet fragrance enveloped me. When I opened my eyes, I saw Chloe's arm, covered in blood. It was a horrifying sight. The nursing home staff quickly subdued the old man while frantically calling for an ambulance. I was in shock, unable to speak. My chest felt tight, and it was hard to breathe. Why on earth would Chloe do that? At the hospital, I stood by Chloe's bed, my expression stern and cold. She lay on the bed, her pale lips forcing a smile. "Don't be angry," she whispered. "I just didn't want to see you get hurt." The anger in my chest only grew, but I managed to say, "Chloe, thank you for saving me. I'll cover all the medical expenses and hire a professional caregiver to look after you," I added. She was silent for a moment, then looked at me with her injured arm, her eyes pleading. "Could you take care of me yourself?" I shook my head firmly and walked out of the room. Outside the door, Sophie was leaning casually against the wall, fiddling with an elegant lighter. When she saw me, she said with a hint of amusement, "I thought for a second you might have a soft spot and agree to her." I kept my face impassive and walked straight past her, ignoring her teasing. "You followed me all the way from the nursing home to her hospital room, and now you're not in a hurry to stake your claim?" I retorted coldly. Sophie quickly caught up with me, pulled a caramel out of her pocket, and pressed it into my hand. "When it comes to your affairs," she said seriously, "I always respect your decisions. Your thoughts are your own, and how I act is my choice. Even if you had agreed to her today, I would have respected your choice," she said firmly. I asked, annoyed, "What if she uses this to play the victim and try to win me back?" Sophie smiled confidently. "You wouldn't let her." I turned to look at her in surprise. She was focused on driving, her fingers expertly turning the wheel as the car made an elegant turn. "If your heart were that easily swayed, you would have fallen for me back in Paris. I wouldn't have had to fly all the way back here to find you," she said lightly. Hearing that, I couldn't help but smile. My mood instantly lifted. Chloe had saved my life. That was a debt I owed her. But her emotional indecisiveness had been a disaster for me. I used to be filled with resentment toward her, but after she saved me, I figured we were even. Just then, Sophie's free hand gently covered mine, her touch soft. She reminded me gently, "Don't forget you're meeting my parents this weekend." I nodded happily, my heart filled with anticipation. On Saturday morning, I chose a well-tailored modern suit with a mandarin collar. As I was about to leave, the caregiver's frantic call came. "Mr. Davis," she said anxiously, "Miss Gable has a fever and refuses to eat. We can't persuade her." I frowned, thought for a moment, and replied calmly, "Then go find her attending physician. She's in a hospital. The doctors won't let her die." At that, Sophie let out an inappropriate chuckle. I shot her a look and hung up. A little while later, her black G-Wagon pulled up to a seemingly ordinary but clearly luxurious estate. Standing in front of the palace-like mansion, I was stunned for a moment. "How come you never told me your family was this well off?" I asked, turning to Sophie. She gave a slightly embarrassed smile. "Oops, my bad. That was an oversight on my part." I stepped into the villa with some trepidation, images of dramatic family feuds from TV shows flashing through my mind. But when I met Sophie's mother, all my anxiety melted away. She was incredibly warm, without a hint of arrogance. The moment we met, she took my hand, chatted with me like we were old friends, and gave me an expensive watch. "We don't have much of value in the house, but wear this for now. When you and Sophie get married, I'll get you something even better," she said gently. I enjoyed the meal immensely. It was both pleasant and heartwarming. The only downside was that during dinner, I got a call from the caregiver. Chloe was insisting on seeing me one more time. Though reluctant, I agreed, worried she might do something else to cause trouble. After dinner, I had Sophie drive me to the hospital. Just before we arrived, she suddenly tightened her grip on my hand and pulled me gently into her arms. Sophie held me tight, and we shared a long, lingering kiss, parting only when our lips were slightly dry. "Don't promise her anything. Promise me that, okay?" she said, a hint of worry in her voice. I could feel her anxiety, so I gave her a soft peck on the lips and whispered, "I won't. Don't worry." At the hospital, I sat by Chloe's bed, silently waiting for her to speak. She was quiet, just looking at me as tears streamed down her face. I remained silent, giving her space until she had calmed down a bit. When she seemed to have cried herself out, her eyes red and swollen, she asked, "Is there really no chance for us anymore?" I took a deep breath and responded calmly, "I'm in a stable relationship now. I'm getting married soon. Chloe, the past you're talking about is over for me." She pressed on. "I regret it, Ethan. I really, really regret it. I did so many things wrong. I realized the person I've always loved is you. Leo was just a moment of impulse." I cut her off, my voice devoid of any warmth. "I don't want to hear this anymore. Nothing you say now can change anything. We both have our own lives to live." I paused, then continued. "You said this was the last time we'd meet, and that's why I came. If you have anything else to say it all now. As for everything else, let's just let it go." The words "let it go" hung in the air, heavy and final. Chloe looked at me, her eyes filled with desperation and pain. Her voice broke as she almost shouted, "I don't believe you're completely over it. You still have the jade bangle from our engagement." I sighed softly, reached into my pocket, and pulled out the bangle. I studied it for a moment, a wave of memories washing over me. Chloe stared at me, her eyes filled with a complex, desperate hope. Then, gritting my teeth, I made a hard decision. I threw the jade bangle forcefully onto the tiled floor. It shattered with a sharp, clear crack. Chloe's eyes went wide and red. "What are you doing? Are you insane?" she screamed. I looked at her coldly and said calmly, "If this bangle is your connection to the past, if it's the hope you're clinging to that we could start over, then I'd rather smash it myself. Chloe, I'm grateful you saved me at the nursing home, but I need you to stay out of my life from now on. You wasted 10 years of my life. That's enough. Now please, give me a break and let me live the life I'm supposed to live." With that, I stood up and walked resolutely toward the door. "Ethan, you're mine! I will never let you go! You get back here!" Chloe's desperate screams followed me, but I didn't hesitate. I left the room without a backward glance. Just as I was about to close the door behind me, an unexpected person appeared in my line of sight. Leo. We found a table at a coffee shop across from the hospital. Leo looked exhausted, as if the years had taken a heavy toll on him. He noticed my scrutinizing gaze and gave a bitter smile as he lifted his coffee cup. "I must look pretty pathetic right now, don't I?" he said self-deprecatingly. "After all these years with Chloe, I was always labeled as the other man, and in the end I got nothing. Ethan, tell me, did I deserve this?" I didn't answer directly. Instead, I looked out the window, where a couple was walking their dog hand in hand, a picture of warmth and harmony. I smiled. Look at that couple. I wonder if they ever broke up. Would they still take care of the dog together? Leo's face immediately soured, thinking I was alluding to something. I didn't explain further, just took a sip of my coffee and asked him, "How have you been lately?" He forced a bitter smile. "Not good. Pretty terrible, actually. Chloe always had my back, which made me feel like it didn't matter if I wasn't particularly capable. I could just be a student advisor or a regular teacher for the rest of my life. But now that she's not protecting me anymore, I've realized I'm not even qualified to give a lecture." The couple had disappeared down the street. Sophie's car was parked quietly outside the coffee shop, waiting for me. I put down my empty cup and said to Leo directly, "Leo, you're young, from a modest background, and you were drawn to a mature, charismatic woman. That's human nature. I don't blame you for that. But you chose to be the other man, which means your desires overrode your moral compass. All these years, that desire has forced you to live in the shadows. If you don't get it under control, it could cause you even more harm in the future. I hope you can wake up, get on the right path, and build a good life for yourself." Charlie looked at me, his eyes slowly turning red. I didn't say anything more. I stood up, left the coffee shop, and got into Sophie's car. Who said I couldn't find someone better after leaving Chloe? I thought to myself. Life is long. It's never too late to start over. A few months later, I heard that Chloe had been suspended from flying due to a serious disciplinary violation. Apparently, Leo had compiled their chat logs into a PowerPoint presentation and sent it directly to her airline, and had also leaked it online. The fallout was significant. I heard the suspension was just the first step. She was later fired. The rumor was she would likely be blacklisted from the industry. As for Leo, I heard he went back to his hometown. His parents arranged a marriage for him. The woman was 10 years older, divorced, and had a daughter. But her family was well off. A minor heiress of sorts. Leo accepted for the money. Later, he came back to the university to give wedding candy to a few of his old work friends. After that, I stopped paying attention. After all, I was getting married. At the romantic top-of-the-tower restaurant, in front of our friends and family, Sophie got down on one knee. She held up a stunning 10-carat square-cut diamond ring and asked me with deep affection, "Ethan, will you marry me?" With tears of happiness in my eyes, I nodded. "I will." On our wedding day, my mom was overjoyed. Wiping away tears, she laughed and teased me. "You, my 34-year-old boy, finally managed to get married." I pretended to be annoyed and patted her on the shoulder, telling her she had a sharp tongue. My dad saw us and quietly stepped aside. Sophie tactfully followed, leaving my mom and me sometime alone. We bickered and laughed our way through the pre-wedding preparations, the whole room filled with joy. At the ceremony, Sophie read the letter she wrote to me, her eyes glistening. "Ethan, hello. I'm your wife, Sophie. We met at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. Our meeting was something straight out of a movie. Just like my feelings for you, very movie-like, because it was love at first sight. Sometimes I'm so grateful to fate for having you bump into me. Because of that, you bought me dinner, and our story began. I'm not usually a forward person, even when my heart is racing. After that night, I kept waiting for your call. I thought, you're new to Paris. You're bound to need a local to show you around. You have no idea how nervous I was that day, clutching my phone until late at night. But a call from you never came. I thought my budding love was about to be crushed, but then I saw you in the university cafeteria. I thought, this must be fate, giving me a second chance, telling me to be more proactive. So I moved into an apartment just a street away from you. I confessed my feelings. I spent the holidays with you. I cooked for you, and I followed you back home. My heart isn't very big. It only has room for one person for a lifetime. Ethan, I love you." I reached up to wipe a tear from the corner of my eye, leaned down and placed a kiss on Sophie's lips. The dawn had passed. At sunset, I finally found my own happiness.